Hi everyone, it's Carrie, aka Nerdy Girl Crates, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today is Wednesday Rewind, and we're going to do another character spotlight. We're going to look at Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, a character who I feel in the MCU has been pretty misrepresented and downplayed a lot. It was one of the things I've been frustrated with the MCU before their change into going in a more diversity direction. I wanted to talk about the Clint Barton I know from the comics and kind of give everybody who's not really familiar with comics a different perspective of who he is. Now, for those who don't know, Clint Barton is a character that first premiered in Tales of Suspense number 57, September 1964. He was created by Stan Lee and Don Heck. His full name is Clinton Francis Barton. Clint grew up in a very hostile environment. His father was very abusive, and that abuse ended up leading to him killing their mother in a car accident and left Clint and his older brother Barney orphans. And Clint and Barney ended up joining the circus. Now, this particular circus was actually a front for a group of thieves, but amongst them there was a character called the Swordmaster who took Clint in under his wing because he saw some talent in him. And this is how Clint learned to be an archer. Also, his brother Barney did. Unfortunately, at one point, Barney decides he is over the lifestyle of living in the circus and being a thief and kind of abandons his little brother by enlisting. And Clint's left alone to survive amongst this situation. He knows is wrong, and he eventually gets himself out of it because one of the members goes too far with a mission, and somebody ends up dead. And Clint doesn't want to be part of that. Well, Barton ends up continuing his life as a thief and eventually comes across Natasha Romanoff, who convinces him to help her infiltrate the Avengers. Barton quickly discovers that Natasha's actually the villain and ends up joining forces with the Avengers. Now, Clint in the main universe of the Marvel Comics is pretty much a ladies' man. He hits on a lot of people, including Scarlet Witch, who he kind of like was attracted to at first sight, but she rebunked his advances, and they become friends after a while. He also was married briefly to another character known as Mockingbird. If you've watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you know who Mockingbird is, but they kind of like skipped over that whole relationship in the MCU, which was another thing I was kind of frustrated with. In the MCU, they kind of borrowed more from the Ultimate timeline where Clint is married with kids. And unfortunately, in the Ultimate timeline, Clint's family is murdered by Natasha Romanoff. But in the main universe, he doesn't have kids. He pretty much kind of lives on his own. There was a comic story from Matt Fraction. A lot of people have a love-hate relationship with that story. It was okay. I wasn't totally against it. There were moments in it, though, it did kind of annoy me with how Clint always seemed to be face down on the ground. But it also gave kind of like a realistic view to Clint's life. Like, he wasn't making all this kind of money that people who on the outside assumed all the Avengers were. He says, Tony's the rich guy, but at least he gives me great health benefits. So Clint ends up living in this rundown area of Brooklyn in this apartment complex. He has to deal with the Russian mafia, who he pisses off when he saves a dog from them, who becomes the famous canine sidekick, who you will see in the series because he's already been revealed. And he's he's trying to balance his life. His past comes back with his relationships between Mockingbird, his time with Spider-Woman, who he also dated, Natasha, who he now refers to as his work wife, which is probably like the best best way to refer to that relationship. Even though if it was once romantic, it was kind of more like her just misleading him to get him to do what she wanted. They have developed more into like these best buddy partners. He also has, like, throughout the history of the comics, a lot of tension with some of the other Avengers. Like him and Cap don't always see eye to eye like in the movies. Clint can pretty much express his opinions to the point where he doesn't have a filter, and it ticks off a lot of the other characters. Clint, is vastly different than what they have in the MCU. Clint also has a run-in with his brother, who becomes a member of the Dark Avengers and is like the evil version of Hawkeye, and they do find a way to make amends, and Clint takes him in to live with him at his apartment, and Barney is able to like get his hands in a whole lot of money that Clint ends up using to buy out the apartment and help take care of the residents living in there. But Clint is not like the Jeremy Renner version. Though I like Jeremy Renner, I thought he was a good choice for the cast. I just wish they had him portrayed more like in the comics. He's more like, his relationships don't always go the way he wants them to. His relationships, both romantically and also as a member of the Avengers. Another thing about Clint that they don't do in the movies is, when they do a flashback at one point when he's a child, he had temporarily lost his hearing. And then later on as an adult, he did completely lose his hearing. So he was actually deaf. And I believe, and I could be wrong, please correct me down below, but I think this choice was because of a letter Stan Lee got from a parent of a child who was deaf. And Tony Stark developed some hearing aids for Clint. But they kind of haven't been reading the more recent books, but I don't think they've covered that much anymore. And again, in the MCU, they don't even go into it at all. I also don't know if this new Hawkeye TV show is going to start going into his original past, because I kind of like his origins. This is a poor kid who loses his family, and him and his brother get adopted into the circus, which, every kid back then might have been dreaming about being in a circus, but it's not what it seems to be, and he ends up learning some skills that aren't necessarily legal kind, and then him and his brother separate. I think felt like it had more depth than the what we get in the MCU, because we don't even really dive into Clint's past except for the big reveal he has a family. And I know the actor himself was always frustrated with the way the role was portrayed. And I don't blame him, because I kind of feel like out of all the characters that have been in the MCU, his character gets little attention. Very little. He's just played up as I'm just the guy with the bow and arrows. And he doesn't really get his moment to really shine much. I know in Age of Ultron was, I think, the most they did with him. Then there was a bit in Civil War when he shows up to convince Scarlet Witch that she, shouldn't be afraid of her power. She needs to own it and use it to help people. And then there was a moment with him and Natasha in Endgame, which if you haven't watched it, I'm not going to spoil it. But I kind of feel like they keep denying him some big moment. I don't know what this show is going to do. I have a feeling this show is just set up for him to pass the buck to Kate Bishop, which is another frustrating thing. I mean, I don't hate Kate Bishop as much as some, but I feel like there again is another character where potential is wasted and being more of a checkbox, unfortunately. But I would really I wish they kind of went into this whole past of Clint, and it made him very human. It's like, look, not everybody comes from like a happy family life, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're automatically going to become the villain. It was like seeing him like living a normal life in this apartment complex, but everything comes to find him there, and he gets himself into situations over and over, finds himself in the hospital a lot. I feel like the comics do him better. I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to watch the show. I might. I think it's only 6 episodes. It's much shorter than the What If series, which frustrated the heck out of me. If you followed my reviews on that, I think there was only 1 episode. I might. And if I do, I will review it. This is the one character from the beginning I felt like was kind of in the background, and every once in a while it would remind you he was there. I really wanted more of his storylines from the comics. One of the storylines I actually did like a lot was his, even though it wasn't a big role, was his role in Disassembled. Avengers Disassembled, when Scarlet Witch loses it and it crosses into House of M. And in House of M, he's the one who gets the closest to her to take her down, and he can't, and he tells her that, he confesses that at one point he was in love with her. And she evaporates him, but you later find out she couldn't even kill him. Even though she allegedly did this with other characters, she couldn't kill Clint. And later on, he finds her in her home country. Turns out it's not her, which becomes a butt of jokes later on, which was getting annoying. It's just, I would like to see Hawkeye, aka Clint Barton, get a little more respect. I am not very hopeful, because he is an interesting character. I know a lot of people kind of say, well, he's just the guy with the bow and arrows, but I think there's a lot of depth to him, and sometimes he's that guy in the Avengers who kind of like snaps everybody out and brings them back to reality. And I kind of wish they, would do that with him. I know this is me trying to tell you a little bit about Clint, but I know it went off the rails more about my frustrations between the MCU and the comic book, at least the main universe of the comic book. Wasn't a big fan of the Ultimates version, I'm going to be honest with you. They were trying to give him some superpowers and stuff, and it was just kind of like, no. Like, you started him off like the regular spy thriller type thing that you get in the MCU, but then, like, when they tried doing a solo story, suddenly he had like this power to just never miss. Like, he was suddenly Bullseye. No. But he's more the grounded hero, and I kind of wish, I wish they would play up on that. I mean, I'm not really big on him having the family in the MCU and everything, because I kind of feel like that takes him away from a lot of the movie plots a lot, and that's the excuse why Clint's not there. But, hopefully, who knows? Who knows what'll happen? So tell me, do you like Hawkeye? Is there any stories of Hawkeye that were some of your favorite? Let me know down below in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you know when I have a new video up. And I will see you on the next one. Bye.